This is Future Star, just letting you know. Spoilers for Hunter x Hunter. Like, just in case you haven't seen Hunter x Hunter, watch it first and then come back to this. Or not. I can't really tell you what to do. I'm gonna start the video now. Bye.
About 2 months ago, I sat down to watch Hunter x Hunter for the first time. Once I was done, 148 episodes later, and no outlet for my thoughts, I started typing. And since that day, it has consumed my every waking thought, every fold of my brain now occupied by this anime. My mind refusing to let it go. Did Gon really snap the wrists of a cripple man to win a fight? Did I watch a bug get addicted to gaming?
No, really, I would have loved to see Miriam jump into a League of Legends match. That would have stunted his growth permanently.
But more importantly, why is the system of Nen so good? Why does it feel as if I could learn Nen? I mean, it couldn't be that hard. I'm human, I'm alive, and I have life force. That's all Nen is, right? Surely I should be able to grab a cup of water, a leaf, and make something happen, just after a little bit of practice. And while I was having these thoughts, I couldn't help but notice that this kid, his best friend, their mentors, these two guys who punched this kid in the face, and their journey through the world had truly captivated me. As a 20-something-year-old with their 30s slowly looming over their shoulder, there's a real sense of dread that comes with realizing that there's a chance in the next 5 to 10 years I could very much be exactly who I am and where I am right now, and that terrifies me. There is no real way to find out if something is worth pursuing until you actually do, and that is the core foundation of what it means to be a hunter, to hunt an interest, a passion, with utmost ferocity, no matter the cost, the work, the challenge. It's no surprise that a drive is required to practice, the reality being that not all practice leads to progress and not all progress moves you forward. There is a balance that needs to be managed, and the consequences of ignoring that balance is, well, we'll get to that later. But no matter what it is you're interested in, it comes down to the willingness to hold hands with discomfort. Practice in itself is finding new and challenging ways to repeat the same cycle. The nature of practice is constant throughout Hunter x Hunter, all cleverly hidden within the magic system. Hidden within the arcs, hidden within the very narrative itself, all reinforced by the characters, how the actions they take shape the way they navigate the world around them, for better or for worse. Nothing feels without consequence in this universe, from the actions of one party influencing and shaping the outcome of another as they intertwine in ways that life tends to do. And it's within Hunter x Hunter that I truly start to appreciate what it means to be challenged. So how does this show about a son and a dad's most intense game of hide and seek go about teaching that? In life, there will always be choices to be made and actions to be taken. It's how we handle those choices that make life what it is, especially when the outside influences interfere with the trajectory of our path. While there are many things we can control in life, there are many things we can't. And it's those little bits of unfairness that rest in the world of Hunter x Hunter that keeps me captivated. Practice may seem like the least important aspect to focus on in something like this show, especially when we can dive into something that's so much more. But for me to ignore the elements of practice is to miss the trees for the forest. They are the fundamentals that allow everything else to grow around it.
When the anime opens, Gon catches a fish. Then we're on a boat. The hunter exam has begun. We start to see Gon interact with the others for the first time. One of those interactions being throwing himself off a ship in the middle of a storm, trusting that someone else will catch him.
From this little interaction, you can gauge 2 things.
1, Gon is completely insane.
And number 2, he has a complete disregard of his own life.
But it works, as 2 people do catch him.
Things are made pretty apparent after this moment. His dedication and will is so infectious that more often than not, people will choose to adapt to him and his ways. When Gon has made up his mind, it is impossible to get him to change it. He's determined and simple, and that's what makes him so very, very charismatic. And it's these little traits that attract many people throughout his journey, people that can guide him and push him to set goals. Goals are really important. For one, they work as trackable evidence to measure your progress, and two, they aid to keep the momentum moving as each goal builds upon the last. Well, at least they should in order to create flow down a particular path. They work as carefully placed stepping stones that will eventually lead you to reaching a milestone. When we break down a goal into multiple smaller goals, all of a sudden it feels like you're moving towards something. Something that doesn't feel like fruitless effort. Hunter x Hunter is great because it's full of people with goals and full of people who want to reach them. Gon wants to find his dad, but first he needs to get stronger to navigate the world. Killua wants to make friends, but first he has to escape the control of his overbearing family. This dude wants to become a doctor, but first he needs money to pay for school fees. Yep, even in this universe, education isn't free. This man wants this man dead for personal reasons, but first he needs knowledge and connections to do so.
The clown seeks the most satisfying kill, but in order to do that, he must allow his victims to reach their full potential.
With goals, you can clearly see where you were versus where you are. That's why it's so important to keep moving forward once goals have been met, and that depends solely on your mindset. Your mindset is a very powerful thing, more powerful than we give it credit for. It decides on how we practice, how often we engage with things, how we reflect. Everything is solely dependent on our mindset. And the thing I love about Hunter x Hunter is that everyone has a very distinct mindset. They all behave in a way that feels so real that it's hard to see these guys as characters. You get so invested with them. It's insane, honestly. And I would like to bring up this specific moment in our first arc that genuinely made me realize what kind of show I was in for. In short, all Gon needs to do is take a badge from another contestant. His target being this very normal clown man named Hisoka, someone who I'll get to very shortly. But for now, I will tell you, if Gon were to challenge Hisoka as they are, well, we saw that happen in the show. Hisoka is an opponent Gon can't just muscle his way through. He needs to grab the badge without engaging in a fight. Curiosity drives motive to explore. The more you explore, the more you learn. And you begin to understand as part of that exploration that you actually kind of suck at something. Gon already knows how to use a fishing rod. We saw it at the beginning of episode 1. But he lacks experience when it comes to timing a cast on a moving target. He recognizes this weakness. Once he figured that out, it was all about getting down the technique and making adjustments until he refamiliarized himself with a much greater level of understanding. This is what we call deliberate practice, and it's structured in a way to improve specific weakness through defined learning. This is the core foundation of what it means to truly progress. I feel like this moment often gets overshadowed by the development of Nen later, but this is an excellent way of showing the level of determination this kid has. It also sets up the basis of what we can expect going forward. When Gon has his mind set to something, he does not change it. So when Hisoka comes waltzing in, punches Gon in the face and says, "If you want me to take back the badge, you punch me in the face." And then he waltzes away before Gon can actively do anything to object. It makes Gon feel as if he now has to pursue it, his mindset being challenged in a way that makes him feel like the accomplishment of gaining
Hisoka's badge in the first place wasn't properly earned.
What I like about this scene is that it highlights that Hisoka didn't adapt to Gon in the way that the others do. Hisoka has power, a power that Gon doesn't have. When you have power, you can just get away with acting on your own interests, your own selfish desires. That's the thing with Hisoka. He has a lot of influence in which he uses to control an outcome the best he can. He knows full well that Gon will pursue his taunt. Hisoka is scary like that. So now we have a new goal, a new stepping stone to pursue once the exam is over. Gon wants to get stronger, but he's also not really sure on how to exactly go about that. The thing is, Hisoka didn't actually tell him how to do that either. Since Hisoka does play a strong role in the beginning of Gon's development, let's take a moment to talk about the kind of person Hisoka is. Because he is a lot of things. A lot of things. Let's do a mini dive into his unhealthy obsession with potential and how that plays out overall.
Hisoka relies on his own intuition, reinforced by his own experience, to pick up on others' potential. So let's get a deeper understanding as to why that is. Let's learn about potential. So when it comes to potential, let's look at these two key takeaways. Noun, someone or something's ability to develop and achieve or succeed, and adjective, possible when the necessary conditions exist. While both are relevant to one's growth, it is the latter I find more fitting to Hisoka in general, due to the fact he doesn't actively teach anyone anything, he merely motivates them to want to kill him. Therefore, he becomes a goal to overcome. Hisoka does not care who you are, only what he can gain from you, and when Hisoka wins, it reinforces his high opinion of himself. But the problem with satisfaction is that it's only temporary. The reason I believe it's potential he sought after plays into his hedonistic behavior and the nature of delayed gratification. Delayed gratification leads to a higher sense of satisfaction, but it also aids with one's impulse control. Bro has to even constantly tell himself he needs to wait until his target is at their peak power. The mere thought of it
Literally turns him on.
That's just the thought of it. You can imagine what an actual fight has on him. Bro, there's like a moment where Hisoka is insanely hyped to fight this other strong guy, and this other guy is just like, sorry, I lost my powers. You can fight me, but you won't enjoy it.
I can't use Nen anymore.
And Hisoka just leaves. If his desires aren't met, then what's the point? He gets nothing from that. The easy way doesn't make him feel good. The easy option doesn't elevate anything in his worldview. Hisoka gets pleasure from being challenged, then he gets satisfaction from killing those people because it's physical evidence that he's that good. #NoFilter. God damn, sorry to rant about Hisoka, but he's so compelling. Anyway, there was a purpose for that, I promise. It was to talk about potential. And the truth being is that potential won't just develop on its own. It comes to your own determination and work. The hardest thing to accept about potential is that it just doesn't have an end. Like you decide how far it goes and you decide when you're done with it. So much of how far we go is just based on perseverance. And persevere we shall, straight to Heaven's Arena, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about in this video. Heaven's Arena is a fun little mini arc. We're introduced to Nen officially and we meet Wing, Gon and Killua's first Nen mentor. With the introduction of Wing, the boys start learning the foundations of Nen. Nen being essentially life force, it gives everyone access to the usage of cool anime magic. How far you go in your Nen practice is based on your own personal determination. We have Ten, Zetsu, Ren, and Hatsu. For the sake of this video, probably already going to be long enough. I'm not going to go into what these all mean. You just need to know that it's the basics. I think that's what I enjoy the most about the Hunter x Hunter magic system, is regardless of your overall type class, you still have to go through the same basics and foundations as anyone else. It's the same as if you want to learn anything. There are people who dabble, there are people who excel, and it just comes down to the individual. How you end up utilizing your Nen and aura is entirely down to you. The thing about this arc that I really enjoy too is that we get to see Gon and Killua perform at the same level. Killua has outclassed Gon in every aspect. Strength, speed, technique, intelligence, and especially battle experience. So it's really fun to see how these two go about learning something new together from the ground up. If this was any other shonen, you'd expect some rivalry between the two, but there just isn't any. We have friends who are just excited to learn something together. They bounce off each other with the same energy to grow. They have the same level of dedication and drive, but most importantly, they support each other. They're both as equally excited for each other's progress as they are their own. Killua even halts his start so he can begin the same time as Gon, after Gon got injured at a previous fight. It's really sweet, and it really accentuates the importance of having a buddy to learn as you do. This is how it plays out in the real world too. Having a friend work as an accountability buddy, someone who has the same goals as you do, and you can work together, will not only encourage each other to grow, but also encourage each other to keep going when the other starts to slip. That's the importance of having a friend with you. It's harder to continue when you have no one to hold you accountable.
And we saw this after the Hunter exam. Killua asked Gon, "What are you going to do now?" And Gon goes, "I don't know." And then Killua's like, "Bitch, you gotta train, bro. You want to punch Ahsoka in the face and you're just gonna, I don't know that shit?" And it's nice. It is so nice to have these characters behave like people. Like, that's why we're at Heaven's Arena. Because Killua was like, "Bro, you gotta train." And it's an absolute delight watching these two interact. The really cool thing about this is you get to see how these boys start to adapt during their journey, especially from the start of Heaven's Arena to when they leave. During the process of learning Nen, they start gaining more experience, and it helps them truly figure out what their overall drive is. Killua just really wants to hang out with a friend, and so he does. The reason he postponed his own learning is so that he can gain the experience of hanging out with a friend for the first time and learning with them. But when it comes to Gon, we start to notice a bit more going on with him. He really likes the thrill of battle. Like a lot. And it becomes apparent that their drives both reflect the areas they lack the most experience in based on their upbringings. For Gon, he lacks battle experience, being raised on this little island. And for Killua, he lacks the experience of friends, being raised isolated as an assassin. It's almost as if what they lack becomes desperation that fuels that desire. One thing you'll find is that Gon is a risk taker, often choosing to ignore logistics of a situation over the potential gain from taking a risk. Gon starts to get invested in these fights, really, really invested, especially on the higher levels of Heaven's Arena. He strives for challenge, the thrill of life or death. We saw it not long after Gon learned 10, putting his life on the line to gain further practice. He wants to learn more. It's in these life or death moments we really start to see Gon adapt, like really adapt. He will just learn on the whim. And if this was anyone else, we would feel cheated by this ability of him to do so. But we have to remember what Gon is. Wing himself is able to make the correct assumption based on Gon's own ability to learn, saying, "It feels just as natural as if beasts of nature are learning to hunt prey." And that's exactly what Gon's upbringing was. He is a forest child. If he didn't figure things out on the whim, he would be dead. The thing is, we know this. Gon has heightened senses. He pays attention to weather patterns. He's bad at logistics, but he's good with emotional cues. But above all else, we saw this back in the Hunter exam, as Gon stalked Ahsoka, waiting ever so patiently for his chance to strike. Just take a moment and look at his face here, and really pay attention to what we're seeing. There is no denying the difference in their abilities, but the framing is telling us that Gon is the perceived threat. This is how he learns. And if that's not enough for you, let's go to the highlight of Heaven's Arena, Ahsoka vs. Gon, where we see the exact same thing happen again. After a flurry of attacks, Gon slows down a bit. And then we see the exact same look. This look of sheer determination that he is going to succeed. And then he does! He punches Ahsoka in the face and we come back around. Gon hands Ahsoka back the badge. It's just so fucking good! And so this may feel like talent to most, something innate, but it's not. How Gon learns is circumstantial to him, influenced by his environment and his upbringing as it felicitates his ability to adapt. And this is just like one of the many examples of what it means to appear to be gifted. It's just work. And the same logic applies to Killua. He's able to generate electricity with his ability, an extremely powerful thing to do given you need to have an extreme familiarity with the type of substance you wish to transmute your aura into. And it's completely tied into the fact that he was raised as an assassin. He was taught to resist torture from a very young age, one of them being electrical. I cannot stress enough how much the environment that these kids grew up in
tie directly into how they learn, but it also drives the desperation of what they lack. In the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, he brings up the Polgar sisters. Clear states that they became expert-level chess players able to beat even pro-adults while they were just in their teen years. To any onlooker, it would appear as if they had a gift for chess, but the reality was they grew up in an environment and culture that prioritized chess above all else, even starting chess at the very young age of just 4 years old, meaning the environment in which we grow felicitates our ability to learn.
And I don't bring this up to make you feel bad that you didn't get this level of experience, support, or push when you were this young. No, I bring this up because it proves that skill is less about talent and more about the work, and specifically finding the right environment to allow you to progress. And then that kind of leads us on to our next section. I'm going to skip over York New because that's more about Kurapika than these boys, but whatever. Greed Island, let's go!
So Greed Island is where the hard yakka begins. This arc, to me, is the standout training arc. While Heaven's Arena was about developing the fundamentals, Greed Island is about putting them into practice and then advancing upon them. And so we meet our second mentor, Bisky. Not only do the teachings help Killua and Gon advance their Nen practice, but it does so in a way that follows the real-life teachings on how to practice efficiently. Greed Island in itself existing as a way to train. The monsters found on this island require different Nen techniques to overcome, building upon the fundamentals we learnt previously. And the thing is, Killua and Gon don't know this straight away. They do need to be taught by Bisky because it would have just taken them way too long to figure it out. And that's where the element of mentorship really comes into play. You can learn things on your own, but it's far easier if you have someone guiding you on how to do it. If Wing was teaching the notes, it is Bisky who teaches the chords, as they often combine or derive from the 4 major principles. They are techniques that expand the user's options when it comes to combat. These advanced techniques would be Gyo, In, En, Shu, Ko, Ken, and Ryo. Again, I'm not going to explain what they are, it's just important for you to have reference to what I'm referring to later on. There are 2 key takeaways here that explore more of the principles of effective practice that we weren't introduced with Wing's mentorship, and that helps play into the flow of learning. It is essential to ease into newer information as one gains the experience to understand where they currently sit. It's in Greed Island and the teaching through Bisky that we truly start to learn more about the process of deliberate practice.
The term deliberate practice was coined by Swedish psychologist Carl Anders Ericsson. Ericsson argues that simply repeating a mastered skill is not enough to help people get better at it. In order to really improve, we must push ourselves. His theory being it's the way we engage in how we practice that really decides the outcome of how we grow. To give our practice a purpose, to go beyond our current level, and the ways we can do that. The same teachings we see Bisky use to guide Killua and Gon. We see Bisky implement different ways to help the boys develop better habits involving different uses of their Nen. One of my favorites being how she gets the boys to practice and familiarize themselves with the use of Gyo by creating a trigger cue for them, indicating when she points up to use said technique. This not only turns it into a game for the pair, but the fact there's no indication of when she'll actually point, it helps the boys heighten their awareness. It adds consistency throughout their entire routine. It's not one and done, time to move on, and it's because of this repetition of rehearsing the basics over and over that makes this training feel so real.
I wish I could tell you the way that my heart absolutely skipped a beat and then melted away when I came across Bisky's teachings, because the way that she teaches applies to what it means to follow a routine of real-life expertise. It is the most efficient way to develop any skill. So let's look at these 2 elements, pacing and repetition. Pacing is to develop at a particular rate or speed. Repetition is just repeating an action. Pretty basic stuff, I'm sure you already know what these 2 words mean. One of the highlights that stood out in Bisky's training was to start slow, allowing the body to learn the proper formation before you start picking up the speed. As skills require more and more components to pull off, it gets harder and harder to maintain them all. For example, when learning Ko, you need to maintain the skills of Ren and Ten, at the same time as well as doing all your other basic functions needed in order to fight. It puts a lot of strain on the body to do something like this for the first time. At this level of development, it becomes more and more important to ensure your form is correct. This allows the correct practice paths to form within your brain, allowing easier access to previous learned information. So let's take a look at this from the perspective of a different skill, like music. So the process of learning an instrument would be to learn the theory, then the notes, then the chords, and then how to play those chords and notes in order to form a song or a melody. It's far more beneficial to play a song as slowly as possible to gain familiarity with the order in which the notes should be played. Then, to reinforce that correct pathway, the next time you play it over and over again, slowly building up speed as you become more familiar with the notes in order. Each step gives you a learning purpose. Number 1, first learn the notes. Number 2, play the notes in order. And number 3, play the notes at the correct tempo. Now, imagine if you had 30 minutes of practice time to start learning a new song. In theory, you could play at a decent speed, using the knowledge of the keys to further your understanding and attempt it as many times as possible within that half an hour. Or you could play it once, taking the time to get it correct all the way through. Most people will vouch for option 1. It feels like you're making far more progress if you attempt the thing over and over. But let me tell you why that's wrong. Let me rephrase it like this. You have half an hour to play a song right once, or to play the song wrong 10 times. What is it that you're actually reinforcing with this kind of practice? In those 10 attempts, you're not learning how to play the song right. You're learning how to play the song wrong. This is usually where people get caught up in how lack of experience can enable bad practice. You're not going to magically get better if you keep trying to force the correct notes when you're focusing on speed. That's luck. You're hoping to get lucky, and you'll end up reaching a point you can't get past. Even if you play the song right once in those 10 times, you've now spent more time practicing the wrong notes. These wrong attempts add up. You'll be silly to think that they don't. Here's the frustrating thing about practice. Practice is still practice regardless if you're doing it right or wrong. Doing something wrong enough times becomes a part of the practice, and this is why it's so important to correct mistakes as early as possible before they develop into the skill you're trying to learn. The way that you practice your foundations is essential to what builds upon them. And you can see how using that knowledge of music refers back to how the boys are learning Nen. And this is why Bisky teaches the mindset of starting slow, especially when it's a new skill. You are a blank slate, and blank slates are easy for developing bad habits. Next up is the repetition stage. Bisky breaks it down while she's teaching Killua and Gon. She says that they are going to do 3 short sessions a day. Again, this works into the perfect routine of deliberate practice. The mind can only concentrate on improvement for so long before it starts to get fatigued. When the brain starts to get tired, it loses the ability to pick up on mistakes, often leading to worse outcomes than if you were just to stop and go do something else. A tired brain is a very dangerous brain. Because that's the thing about deliberate practice. It is work. It is hard work. The thing is, deliberate practice needs to be challenging. It can't be boring. It can't be easy, and it can't be comfortable. Deliberate practice is specifically working on your weakness, and confronting your weakness is insanely frustrating, maddening, and very, very annoying. But it's never boring. Deliberate practice is characterized more than just trying to work harder. It's about doing new things. Getting out of that comfort zone, baby. There's also one last method of practice here that I briefly want to touch on. And this is when Bisky starts teaching the boys how to use Nen outside their specialized categories. She mentions that working on the things they aren't familiar with will enhance the ease it takes when it comes back to maintaining their specializations. This is also correct. One of the best ways to really enhance your practice is to work on something you completely suck at. Something so above your skill level that you don't even imagine why you'll be attempting to try it in the first place. This level of practice is difficult, like really, really difficult. You're actively challenging yourself in a way that is unmatched to what you've been doing before.
Yeah, that's one fine-looking barbecue pit. Why doesn't mine look like that?
It's like starting a game at level 1, understanding the fundamentals, and then attempting to fight the boss without collecting the proper experience on how to do so. So you're kind of just winging it. And I know that kind of sounds contradictory to what I was talking about earlier, but it's these boss battles that kind of help you go back and revisit the areas you need to practice before you need to attempt it again. This practice should be done sparingly. It's not fun participating in an exercise you know you can't overcome yet. It's good to give it a go, but you're not supposed to do it all the time. If the work is too easy, then I'm afraid you're just getting into the area of regular practice. There's nothing wrong with regular practice too, by the way. This practice is also really important to maintain the skills that you've been learning, often in the form of play. You're not actively trying to improve in these moments. You're just playing around with what you've learned in between your deliberate practice sessions. It's almost like a recall. It's really important just to have time to play with your skill set. After all, it's during play we tend to explore the most and discover that we suck at something. And the thing is, you don't have to be good all the time. You don't have to be trying to get good all the time either. Deliberate practice and regular practice are as important as each other. One works as a growth tool and the other works as maintenance and fun. It's all about the balance. You shouldn't ever lose sight of the enjoyment of what you're pursuing. All of Greed Island is a literal gamification on practice. If you can make things feel like a game, if you can make things feel fun, then challenging the hardest sections make it easier to tackle. And that's the thing. We see that Gon and Killua are actively enjoying themselves. There's a real sense of accomplishment we see when they progress through Bisky's mentorship. Each little task they achieve makes it feel like they're developing closer and closer to their own personal milestones. Killua gets to still hang out with Gon and do friendship stuff, and Gon still gets to train and get stronger. This also kind of accumulates to the dodgeball match we see at the end of the arc. But it's also this dodgeball match we start to see more of that desperation that fuels their drives and their motives, and how neglect can slowly worm its way into progress, even without you realizing it. As we learn and grow in one area, we can easily lose sight of another. It makes it easier to ignore a weakness we're neglecting when we're progressing in a different area. Progress in itself feels so good and addictive that it can make coming back to other areas we're lacking in difficult. It is so easy to get lost in progress, and it is so easy to feel satisfied with how far you've come that one day you will just stop challenging yourself. It's what makes reflecting on our own actions all the more harder. Challenging our belief system is one of the hardest things we can do. It is our own personal sunk cost fallacy. So let's take a look at Tesgera. Tesgera, who is he? Well, that doesn't really matter. What does matter is his little role in this arc. He's the jealous veteran type. Tazzy is the guy with skill that eventually stopped trying and becomes complacent. I enjoy his addition because it also connects to a part of myself. The part of me that feels confident with my progress and wants to settle. Tesgera is so confident in his abilities that he ends up losing the respect and value of effort, and by conjunction, practice, and in doing so becomes stagnated, completely convinced himself that he was good enough. His confidence, he really couldn't handle the idea of Killua and Gon, these two children with such talent that they completely outclass him. And at first, he's threatened by it. He's intimidated by the fact that these two have so much potential. And in doing so, he creates a falsehood as to why he was still better than them until he was confronted by the amount of work and effort they put into their practice, into their learning. Like, we saw it. These kids are dedicated and so determined, to the point where Tesgera had to acknowledge it. Tesgera had to come to terms with the fact that he lost touch with the reason he started practicing in the first place. He lost the drive to put in the effort, and he essentially just stopped creating new experiences for himself, and in doing so, stopped progressing. That's the trap with progress. Once you reach a certain level,
It starts to feel as if you can start slacking because the level you're at feels so satisfying. It's so easy to fall into this mindset because the idea of not needing to work hard anymore feels like you've made it. And in a similar but slightly different position, we have a character named Castro.
We meet Castro back in Heaven's Arena, and to set the scene, we have everyone's love to hate him clown Hisoka and this beautiful long-haired twink Castro, and they're about to duke it out. So Castro falls into a different area of complacency, similar to Tezgera, but not exactly the same way, and it was more on how he treated his previous matches rather than his ability per se. And how did he treat those matches? Well, we don't have to guess. He tells Hisoka at the beginning of their fight, "In the past 9 matches, I've never once been serious. They were all warm-ups to defeat you." And bam, the stage has been set. We have Hisoka, who doesn't seem to be taking this fight seriously at all, and Castro, who has never been more serious in his life. Castro is landing blow after blow on Hisoka, and Hisoka is performing card tricks. Castro loses, impaled by the cards he so easily dismissed. But how did Castro lose? He was taking this seriously, right? He lost to a guy that doesn't even show up to every fight he registers for. What happened? Well, Hisoka happened. But more specifically, it was experience. The difference between the two fighters was experience. At this point of the series, we know what Hisoka is. He wants to be entertained. Hisoka is a battle addict, and Hisoka is highly perceptive. During his previous 9 matches, Castro has consistently repeated the action of not taking his opponents seriously, a behavior that has resurfaced incidentally during a match he's supposed to take seriously. He stagnates without truly realizing the pattern he's caught himself in. While Castro's experience and knowledge in itself wasn't false, it was built around an unchanging perspective, something someone with greater experience can exploit, and exploit Hisoka does. In the past 9 matches, I've never once been serious. Castro reveals his hand before the fight even starts. Hisoka exploits those parts he's been shown, taking advantage of both how his opponent treats battle and playing into the part and how he's being perceived. Hiding his own aura output behind Zetsu, acting nonchalant, allowing his arms to be chopped off, and of course performing card tricks. As the fight goes on, Hisoka reveals more and more insight on his own knowledge of Nen and recognizes the ability Castro is pulling off is stupid difficult and requires a lot of focus. But in the process of taking on such a technique, Castro has forgotten the importance of the basics, the key fundamentals that are absolutely necessary during Nen combat, something we ourselves don't truly appreciate until we get to Green Island. Do you see how good this is? There's one last part of this fight that I truly adore, and it's in this detail. Let's take a moment and really take in the intensity of Hisoka's gaze here. It feels as if he's been insulted by Castro towards the end of the match. The piercing use of Gyo, a basic technique that would have been able to see past Hisoka's trickery had Castro remembered to use it. It's beautiful. I love this fight so much. It has all these little tiny parts that just work together to produce such a satisfying outcome. The fight itself is brilliantly placed, not only as an in-universe thing, but also at a narrative level. Constantly throughout Hunter x Hunter, we are reminded of the importance of experience, and this particular fight sets up a very subtle vibe on how we can be blinded by our own perceived knowledge. Not because that knowledge in itself is wrong, just more the fact that we're unable to recognize a fault in that pattern because we haven't reached a point where we can actively see if it is moving us forward or holding us back. And the only way to gain that knowledge is experience.
And so what I'm getting at here is that Hunter x Hunter is full of little moments like this where characters become complacent, or they lose sight of the fundamentals, or they stop changing and they're forced to confront that. It's moments like these that are as equally motivating for me to continue to elevate my own progress, because yeah, stagnation fucking sucks. But I think that's also the point.
In life, we have the good, the bad, and then the moments in between. And it's what we do with the moments in between that truly shape us. And that's no more evident than what I'm going to talk about next. There is one last practice I want to talk about, and that is the ability to confront your sense of self. Things go wrong in Hunter x Hunter, like a lot, and sometimes all the work and progress just seemingly becomes undone in a single action. Sometimes things just don't fall into place. It might have come apparent to you, but loss is just as part of the cycle of progress as victory and triumph. I think it's important now to bring that up. Progress isn't linear. There will be times where you will be making some real steps forward, only to have it completely undone. Completely influenced by a source outside your own control. There's this character in Hunter x Hunter that draws the attention of two main parties. One of these parties wants this character dead and powerless, and the other wants him alive and as strong as possible. Their complete opposite trajectories are bound to cross paths, as their target is one and the same. The two just as easily undo the progress of the other for the pursuit of their own interests. And it's moments like these that really cement just how frustrating it is when things don't go your way, and the pure ecstasy that comes from when they do. And that's the cycle we live in. That's life. Losing at the hands of an outcome you couldn't possibly control. It feels unfair. But losing to your own play is just right disastrous to the mind, as it can shatter your perceived sense of self. So up until now, I've spent a lot of time heavily focusing on the physical side of progress and what you can achieve through that. There's no denying that Gon's worst quality is his stubbornness. A stubbornness that leads him to be selfish. Very, very selfish. Throughout the story so far, there had been multiple accounts of Gon ignoring the words of others to do things his own way, even ignoring that of logistics, often throwing away his own well-being in the process, a habit that's so ingrained in his mindset he believes it's okay to throw away the well-being of those around him. We just have to look at Kill's hands during Greed Island. We just even have to look at Gon's hands during Greed Island. Over and over while you're watching Gon's journey, you watch any form of consequence sneak away from him. Accountability, none. The times we do see it, when he gets punched in the face by Kite and Hisoka, it's only because they have more power than he does, and it forces him to reflect on that. But as Gon gains more strength and more battle ability, he begins to be able to hold his own, and we start to see his mindset get worse. And I say worse because in Gon's mind, his behavior isn't a problem. He is well aware of it. People who say sorry and then proceed to do the thing aren't sorry. Gon doesn't have to face consequence until he does. And the thing is, we can kind of follow the way that Gon escapes consequence by just looking at his arms in each arc. At the start, during the Hunter exam, he breaks his right. During Heaven's Arena, he breaks his left. Didn't injure his arms in York New. He kept them intact. It was, I fucking love that arc. Then we get to Greed Island, damages his left arm and loses his right hand. And lastly, we reach Chimera Ant, where he loses an arm entirely. The severity of damage he takes to his arms each arc increases with the progress that he continues to make. The gain of success of overcoming adversity does not outweigh the loss of temporarily losing an arm. It is not something to be learnt from. You rarely need to track why success is working, because why would you? It's obviously working. I felt as this was done on purpose. To give the sensation that Gon was indestructible, that strength gave him opportunity beyond all else. With his determination, nothing was off limits. Wing and Bisky were mentors to Gon, reminders of what you're capable of through guidance and the proper support. But Hisoka and Kite were lessons. And through experience, you gain knowledge, but if you ignore what that knowledge is, well then you don't grow. His emotional growth was kind of stunted in a way. Not because of his involvement in how Kite got killed, but because he doesn't have the mental experience or capacity to rationalize it in a way he can manage. He breaks. He completely breaks. He spirals, and he spirals hard. So he handles it in the way that he always has.
just at a much greater level of emotional intensity and violence. The level of self-awareness it takes to recognize how everything shapes your identity takes a lot of confrontation, especially when it involves the flaws of that identity. Like, you can't change aspects that led you to this moment, but you can change how you handle it going forward. In fact, self-reflection is so hard that it's a skill you can't be taught. You have to learn that on your own. And it's often through loss and sacrifice do we start to see our flaws. And there's no better character to highlight this than Mr. Killua himself. It's through loss and sacrifice we can see how much Killua truly had to give up, to the point he has very little idea on what he actually wants to do in life. His identity was always Zoldyck Assassin. He didn't have a normal childhood. It was all dedicated to serving his family. Now, in fear of losing Gon, someone he has described as being the light, Killua is sacrificing his well-being for Gon's sake. Killua has always had to put someone else's needs and wants above his own, more so than Gon ever had to do. And it is tragic, but it's this level of loss and sacrifice that helps Killua able to self-reflect, his character development being the strongest out of our entire cast. It's those parts we tend to avoid and neglect that end up leaving us in positions of complete mental vulnerability at our lowest points. Chimera Ant is full of them. During this arc, we see this neglect accumulate in each of the boys' biggest weaknesses. In fact, they even had one last test to figure out what that weakness was. At the current time in the story, this weakness was presented to be relating to their battle abilities, even stating if they cannot figure out what their weakness is, no amount of training will ever help them progress past a certain point. But with hindsight, we can see it was deeper than that, and that is why they both ended up failing their final test. The real weaknesses coming from their inability to confront their belief system. As it would turn out, the consequences of failing this test being Killua would have to leave Gon behind, and Gon having to give up Nen for a month became the very real outcome once the arc was over. It is our minds that require the most amount of work to change because that needs a level of acceptance far beyond physical skill. It tackles the flaws we have made for ourselves. At this point, the choices you've made, whether it be on purpose or not, have allowed you to grow and develop into a particular way, the good and the bad. Life in itself is a practice. Discomfort, loss, and pain is unavoidable. Though we'll never really be able to rehearse our reactions to the unpredictable, we can at least start preparing ourselves for when it comes. I feel as if that's why we pursue a practice, to strengthen our relationship with failure, to get familiar with discomfort, to understand that you will mess up, you will make mistakes, but you can get back up and try again. But without feedback, without reflection, we can quite easily fall back into the same cycle. One of my favorite sayings being, nothing changes if nothing changes. When I finished Hunter x Hunter for the first time, it filled me with regret knowing I can no longer experience Hunter x Hunter for the first time. But then it dawned on me, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe the next time I watch, I'll catch something I miss. Maybe the next time I engage with Hunter x Hunter, I would have grown more and find something new that I could take from it. There's just something about how the show dives into the nature and practice that really speaks to me. It made me feel that I was truly capable of anything, as long as I was willing to put myself in a level of discomfort and confront parts of me that I've been neglecting. The thing about Hunter x Hunter is, like, it's not just the good experiences that matter, it's the bad ones as well, the uncomfortable ones. When we look into the nature of the brain and how patterns form, it's all reinforced by repetition. As we repeat something enough times, it becomes easier and easier for the brain to access that information on how to deal with it. In order to move forward, there needs to be purpose, there needs to be reflection. And discomfort comes from breaking away from the easy. We need to make sacrifices in life, and if we don't, we'll just lose ourselves. Practice is achieved through building upon the steps learnt before it. I like to think this is why Hunter x Hunter feels as complete as it does. Why I spent, 45 minutes talking about practice, as if it isn't so clearly ingrained in the show's narrative. The way that each arc builds upon the arc before it, the story puts into practice and what it means to practice. Life in itself is just one giant cycle of practice. Every time something goes wrong or it gets hard, you catch yourself slipping. There's a chance for it to get better again. Don't lose track of the good just because things are hard. You can try again, you can learn, and you can grow, and you can keep going.
find a friend and do the journey together. You'll be amazed at what you can accomplish if you just put in the work.